We're learning some damning new details about the relationship between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, thanks to veteran journalist Bob Woodward's new book, War. After leaving office, Trump spoke with Putin as many as 7 times after he left office. Woodward also reports that Trump sent the Russian president COVID-19 testing equipment at the height of the pandemic in 2020. Yes, that's right. While we couldn't get it, Vladimir Putin got it directly. Here's Tim Walz.
The Republican Party would not be saddling up to Vladimir Putin, and I think it's a big concern. It's coming out at this point in time, which I'm glad it is. And again, as I said, as governors, it's just unconscionable that we were not getting this equipment. Vladimir Putin was.
Joining us now, former CIA director and NBC News senior national security and intelligence analyst, John Brennan. Welcome, Director. Good to see you.
Director Brennan. If the reporting from Bob Woodward's book is to be believed, and I believe it, I would like to know how the hell did Donald Trump get COVID tests over to Vladimir Putin? Because people out there watching, they don't understand that a country like Russia, random people just can't pick up the phone from the White House and the federal government and call up Russia or just make their way over there. It doesn't work like that. There are specific lines of communication. What is happening here? What do you make of this reporting?
Well, it's unsurprising, and we also know how much Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin have been best buds for a number of years. And so the fact that a president of the United States can do these things, I think, should really give us concern about Donald Trump getting back into the White House, because he can do these things irrespective of the logic, common sense, or what's in U.S. national security interests. Who knows what he did in terms of his conversations that Bob Woodward says that he had with Vladimir Putin and giving these COVID-19 tests. But the President of the United States has tremendous authority and discretion in terms of what he can do. And clearly, Donald Trump does a lot of things outside of the light of day, and he does it only because he wants to do it, and it's in his personal interest to do it, not in the interest of the United States.
So, Director Brennan, you have multiple members of the Trump administration now out on the campaign trail stumping for Vice President Harris and talking about their experience in the Trump administration. Take a listen to what Alyssa Farah-Griffin had to say about the number of Trump staffers who are now supporting Vice President Harris.
Now America is known all throughout the world as occupied America. They call it occupied. We're being occupied by a criminal force. And we're an occupied state that refuses to let our great law enforcement professionals do the job that they so dearly want to do.
Team in the control room, do we have E73? Can we play that from Wednesday in Pennsylvania? Thanks.
His own vice president is not supporting him. Multiple former chiefs of staff, former national security advisors, multiple former Department of Defense heads, chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff, his White House comms director, deputy press secretary, another White House comms director. The list goes on. All of us who saw him up close and personal as president in some of the senior most roles and the most consequential roles are the people saying he should be nowhere near the Oval Office. This has never happened before.
It is, in fact, extraordinary, Director Brennan, that this many people, even those who are not choosing to support publicly Vice President Harris, are simply saying this man cannot be allowed near the White House again. What signal does it send you that that extraordinary list, Alyssa Farah-Griffin ticked through, is saying this man is a threat to our national security?
Well, it should be a warning call to the American public in terms of what dangers we might face if Donald Trump is elected president. Clearly, people like John Kelly, Jim Mattis, John Bolton, Secretary Esper, and others, all these individuals with many, many years of experience on the national security front, did see up close and personal just how dangerous and irresponsible Donald Trump was. And so that's why, again, I find it unsurprising that we have so many of these individuals who have dedicated their lives and have at great sacrifice to protect the interests of this country are coming out very publicly and saying what a danger Donald Trump is. And I still find it so surreal that not more Americans are listening to what is clearly going to be a very much a dangerous situation if Donald Trump gets back into the Oval Office.
I think that's such a profoundly important point that folks are, in some sense, sort of dismissive of this. They kind of put it, well, that's foreign policy or that's something that's outside. But it is all connected in so many ways. And the connection, at least the connective tissue for me, what I want to focus on with you right now is the fact that Donald Trump had 7 that we know of conversations since leaving office with Vladimir Putin. Could you speak a little bit about whether or not that's unusual for a former president to have that level of contact with an adversary, let alone another foreign leader? And what is the TikTok of that? How does that happen? And is there any way our government is aware of what was actually communicated? We do have some sense in the COVID conversation that Vladimir Putin was like, okay, Donald, don't tell everybody that you've given me this because they're going to come after you more than they're going to come after me. And Donald's like, okay, but I'm happy to tell him. You know, how does this whole work with this communication?
Well, we don't know the content of the call, and I don't know whether or not the U.S. government, the U.S. intelligence community are aware of the calls as well as the content. But clearly, this is so unusual. You know, former presidents might reach out to foreign leaders to express condolences or congratulations or something, but it would be non-substantive. But if, in fact, the content of this was such, it could have been a violation of U.S. law, the Logan Act, which prohibits any U.S. citizen from engaging in diplomacy with foreign governments with an intent to try to adjust their conduct in any type of controversy or dispute with the United States government. And clearly, we have a lot of disputes ongoing with Vladimir Putin, most notably Ukraine, as well as, you know, if Donald Trump had a conversation with Vladimir Putin and Putin was encouraging him to weigh in with the Republican Party in Congress to weigh in against giving aid to Ukraine, that could be a violation of the Foreign Agents Registration Act, because he'd be lobbying then on behalf of a foreign government. So again, I don't know about the content of this. I don't know whether or not the authorities are aware of this and what might be done about it. But clearly, Donald Trump is somebody who is just addicted to flattery. And Vladimir Putin is a master manipulator and knows how to flatter Donald Trump. So again, the fact that Bob Woodward reported this, it's not surprising. Again, it's not confirmed, but it's clear that Donald Trump has an agenda here, as does Vladimir Putin. This is the most important presidential race for Vladimir Putin, because this is the first U.S. presidential election since the invasion of Ukraine. And this is really an existential challenge to Vladimir Putin to try to salvage something out of that ruthless and brutal aggression in Ukraine. And Donald Trump is his savior. If Donald Trump gets back into the Oval Office, who knows what Donald Trump is going to do? And he can do it unilaterally because, again, the authorities and of a president of the United States are vast.
Vast, and even one could argue even more vast now, given the latest ruling from the Supreme Court.
Which is just
I mean, it makes zero sense. I have more questions for you, Director Brennan, but we're almost out of time. We told Director Brennan he just needs to come back every weekend, y'all. We're going to see what we can get from him. Before you go, Prime Minister Netanyahu and the president spoke for the first time in months. The New York Times writes about as the Mideast crisis has deepened. And I'm just wondering your take on just the ceasefire deal and the lack thereof thus far. The current CIA director, Director Burns, has been one of the lead negotiators, you know, traveled back and forth to Doha and the region just to try to get something on the table. And it seems as though we are farther away from a ceasefire between, frankly, now there's multiple fronts. What's happening on the border of Israel with Lebanon, also, obviously, the conflict between Hamas and the Israelis. Just your thoughts on where we are right now in this moment.
It's been clear to me for quite some time that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not interested in having a ceasefire either in Gaza with Hamas or in Lebanon with Hezbollah. What he wants to do is to try to exact as much punishment as possible against those organizations and the people there. And it's a tragedy that is going to continue to get worse. We have over 42,000 or so Palestinians in Gaza dead and 100,000 injured. And then in Lebanon also, we see all the devastation that's taking place there. And quite frankly, I think we as Americans need to be as outraged about the loss of innocent Palestinian life and Lebanese life as we are outraged, understandably and rightly, about the loss of Israeli life. But clearly, it seems to be a disequilibrium there between how much we, in fact, react to the suffering, the loss of life of the Palestinian people, which continues to go on, and Bibi Netanyahu, I think, is going to continue with his right-wing war cabinet, try to do as much as possible to not only diminish the capabilities of his adversaries in the region, but also to try to devastate a lot of the region as a whole.